This episode is one of many that I would like to give a little bit of a heading, a little bit of a warning to my listeners that this episode probably isn't the most cheerful. Actually, I definitely know it isn't. And I've had really good times in my life, really good memories, but also I've had very low memories and really bad memories. And when I said yes to God, the calling that He laid on my heart for me to go ahead and share all of the nitty and gritty and everything in between on my life to show His glory and His amazingness, I also had to accept, and I'm currently telling this to myself, I'm also accepting and I'm choosing to share all of the downs as well as my ups. And some of it I might keep to myself, some of the details, but mainly I wanted to go ahead and share the really low lows of my life. And this is one that isn't super cheery. But yes, I just wanted to give a little bit of a heading before our episode started today. So I believe where we left off last time is when I really was having trouble with hope. And so that's kind of where I'm picking up. After all the anger started to fade, after the sadness kind of dulled, I started to feel something a little bit worse. I kind of went numb. I wasn't as much angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just exhausted. And honestly, that brought me to a breaking point again, even though I was trying to avoid it. Ultimately, my thought process was, okay, if I just go numb, I won't break down again. And ultimately, a little bit of foreshadowing, it kind of did. I wasn't able to just prevent my breaking down. So in my mind, at the time, going numb and pushing through was my way of trying to avoid breaking down again. So one night, that changed. It was a normal night, and I was just taking a bath like I always did. Still do, but for me sometimes standing in the shower makes me lightheaded and weak. Showers, baths, definitely one of my pot triggers, left me very lightheaded and weak. So the bath time quickly became one of my calm, safe, quiet places that was easier for my body. But that night, my body had other plans. Out of nowhere, one of my POTS episodes hit, and it hit hard. Now, what that looked like for me was my heart started to race, my vision started to fade, and I felt that dizzy rush that I felt way too many times before. I remembered that I tried to breathe and to kind of stay calm and to try to hold myself together, but I just couldn't. I remember I was wearing my Apple Watch, and I remember trying to use my Apple Watch to call my parents. Like many times before, that's what I did when I needed help. And my dad, him being so smart in technology and all of the things, he set up a little word that I could tell Siri, and it would let my parents know that I needed help and would send them my location. So even though my brain was scattered and I was still filled with all of my emotions that my episode was giving me, that was still one of my first response because it had been such a habit. So I was looking for my Apple Watch to call my parents, and my hands were shaking as I fumbled to press the button, but I didn't make it on time. What I mean by that is I was trying to hold down my button on my watch to tell Siri my code word and that I needed help for it to go and message my parents for me. And my last memories there, I was holding the button down, or so I thought, and then that was it. I didn't make it in time. I lost consciousness in the bathtub. I fully passed out. So, when I lost consciousness, my body went limp, and I started slipping into the warm bath water, deeper and deeper. I'm not sure how fast it was, whether I slowly slid or whether I just went whoop and like splashed, because I was just sitting there. But eventually my face was almost completely under the water. I wasn't breathing. I had almost no air. My nose almost was completely under the water. I believe maybe, so it was almost under the water. So what I imagine is my nose had one nostril in the water, maybe my mouth in the water, and maybe one nostril out of the water. But anywho, it was almost completely under the water. And my body kind of just stopped. And then something I can only describe as a miracle happened. Somehow, my parents got a notification from my Apple Watch that something was wrong, that code word was sent, I believe. And they rushed into my bathroom. And when my mom saw me, she didn't hesitate. She just pulled me out of the water. My appearance wasn't like normal. My lips were blue, and I wasn't breathing. She did what any mom would do. She fought for me. She and my dad shook me. They called my name. They slapped my face for circulation, and I finally gasped. I guess I cleared the water from my lungs, and I came back from my episode very confused and in my state of I was just in the bath at 1 second remembering what happened before the blur. I was kind of terrified. And parents in my bathroom, they weren't there before, and I didn't remember calling them. So I think we all were a little bit shook. That night, there were a lot of tears. I don't even remember anything very clearly, just flashes of panic and like warmth in my mom's voice, of her yelling all of these things in fear. When I lay in my bed that night, wrapped up in blankets, my parents hovering close over me, it hit me just how fragile life really is. I had gone from feeling numb to realizing that ultimately I could have been gone in seconds. I wasn't ready for that. Like, granted, I don't think anybody could really brace themselves for that feeling. But I didn't want that to be my story's ending. That shook me so hard, y'all. In the days after, I kept replaying it all in my head, over and over. The way the water felt against my skin before everything went black. The panic in my mom's voice when I came back from my episode, and the look of panic in my dad's eyes. Y'all, it haunted me for a while. It haunted me every time I told my loved ones around me of the quick scare that could have ended so differently. And it just haunted me for such a long time. But as scary as it was, I couldn't shake the quiet truth that I knew deep down I shouldn't be here, but I am. That night reminded me that every breath I take is grace. God doesn't just save me from something. He saved me for something. I didn't know what that was yet. I still fully don't, because obviously I can't know my whole life and the life that the Lord has planned for me. But I could feel a wondering thought in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry at my body or bitter about being sick. I was just thankful that I was still here. And for me, being thankful that I was still here was such a big thing, because after feeling sick and the pain every day, every night, losing myself, for me, being thankful that I was still here, still being how I was so big. So, like I said, after that night, the hardest part wasn't just recovering physically, it was having to talk about it. Every time we told someone what happened, it felt like I was living it all over and over again. The fear and the hopelessness that I felt, it all come back. My eyes would try to fill up with water, tears. I'd have to try to choke it down and act like I was strong. It was a movie I couldn't turn off in my brain. I still kind of did the quote-unquote Emma way, where I would present the information with what happened with a few giggles behind it and hope that it would soften the blow, at least to others, because in my heart and in my brain, I couldn't stand to relive it again and again and again, but that's what was happening. So when we called loved ones and told them what happened, everyone kind of reacted in the same way, in the sense of shocked and worried and scared. They would say things like, "Oh my gosh, that's terrifying," or "Thank God you're okay." And I'd smile and nod, trying to hold it together, but inside I felt like my chest was tightening all over again, even behind my giggles and my laugh and saying, "Oh yeah, it's okay." But also, it's strange how your brain can't always tell the difference between remembering something and reliving it. So my body would start to shake and my heart would start to race, and suddenly it was like I was back in the bathtub with harsh words of drowning again. I hated that feeling. I hated that something so real and so painful had become a part of my story, or a story that we had to tell people. But I also knew that my parents needed to tell it. We all did. It wasn't gossip, but it was gratitude. We needed people to know that God had stepped in, that something miraculous happened. Still, every time I share it, I feel like peeling open a wound that hasn't fully healed yet. Sometimes, after telling it, I would go to my room and just sit in silence, waiting and letting the waves of memory wash over me until I couldn't breathe. And it felt like that wasn't a choice. It felt like I had to go separate myself, sit alone, beg God to take these emotions away from me, but ultimately it'd leave with me just flowing with tears. Ultimately, I started to realize that surviving something didn't mean you stopped feeling it. I sat there in my room in the silence trying to figure this all out with all of my brain knowledge, but my heart had a lot of trouble I was thinking about my past on what happened with my grandmother, and I had this lesson just pop up in my heart and head. Sometimes surviving means facing it over and over again until it loses its power over you. With time, something started to change. The more I told the story, the less it broke me. It still hurt me, but I began to notice that something each time I spoke about it, the fear had a little less control over me. I started to realize that God maybe wasn't just saving me that night. He was using that night. Every time I shared what happened, someone else reminded that miracles still happen. That even when things go dark, God still moves. So instead of feeling scared or haunted by that memory, I started to feel a reminder by it that I'm still here for a reason. I stopped drowning in the story and started standing with gratitude and strength and with a little bit more faith than before. After that whole experience, I started to try to live like nothing happened. Everything felt different, even if no one else could see it, which I felt like I could see on everyone's face that knew what had happened and that I was pretending that it didn't happen. I was still reminded by their face that it did happen. I wanted so badly to go back to normal, but my body and mind just weren't the same. Every time I got in the shower, I felt a flash of panic every time I started to feel lightheaded. My chest would tighten and my mind would race back to the bathtub. My parents told me to take a break from taking baths for a while because at least in the shower, even though I felt lightheaded and faint, what happened in the bathtub couldn't happen, or at least couldn't happen as badly as it would in the shower. So I toughed it out and I started to take my showers. And when I was raised with all of these emotions that brought me back to the night with the bathtub, I tried to brush it off or to laugh or tell myself that I was fine. But I wasn't. My days turned into a careful routine. I'd move my shower, plan my steps, keep water and salt nearby, double check my Apple Watch. Even though I acted like it was okay, I was constantly on alert. Not that I hadn't already been, but a little extra. I was waiting for my body to betray me again without even knowing when that could happen. At church, people would ask me how I was doing, and my normal response was I'd smile and say, better. But that just wasn't the truth, and I tried all the time to try to make it the truth. Some days I'd start staring at the clock, counting down until I went home just so I could breathe, or that nothing bad would happen in public. For some reason, that kind of rattled my earth, was being afraid for something to happen in public, not just afraid that it would happen at all. Dance was even harder. I was a student at the time, and I tried to keep up, but my legs would go weak or my heart would race. For no reason, I'd fake a smile and push through and hope nobody noticed how pale I was getting, how red my face was getting on the cheeks, or how my heart was throbbing outside of my chest, or that I was dripping in sweat. Inside, I was frustrated. I missed the version of me that could move freely without fear. But what I remember most about that time wasn't just the exhaustion. It was the quiet pretending. And what I mean by that is I didn't want people to worry or look at me like I was fragile. So I learned how to act fine. And even when I was falling apart, I had my smile on my face and I said, no, I'm good. It's okay. That was the new normal for me. And it wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just heavy. Quiet, but really heavy. Over time, though, I started finding little ways to live again. Not big, just small. I'd listen to worship music while laying on the floor, or letting the words fill into my heart even when fear left my heart out the door. Some days, I'd actually laugh again, and like a real laugh, unforced laughter. And I realized that for a few minutes, I wasn't thinking about being sick or being scared, and that I was just living. It wasn't that everything got better overnight, because it didn't. It had bad days, dizzy days, and movements that made me want to give up. But I started learning that healing isn't always loud or fast. It's quiet. In the moments you ultimately choose to get up, even when it's tempting to stay down. And especially even when it hurts. It's in every breath that reminds you you're still here. And somehow for me, that was enough for the time. Now, for me, after that, things started to settle down again, or at least what I thought was normal life, or normal life that pots could have. The days weren't easier after that, but they felt a little bit more familiar, and the panic had started to fade a little bit. The shock of what happened before had worn off, and I had gotten used to feeling dizzy, and used to being careful, used to pretending that everything was fine. People around me started to act like things were back to normal too, and that helped me a lot with my confidence. It was like a part of me wanted that. I wanted to believe that I could just keep moving forward, that I could keep pretending that the worst was behind me. But I think underneath it all, there was still heaviness and a quiet sadness that never really left. Even though I was having all of those happy thoughts and all of those, whoa, I'm finally starting to find my new normal thoughts, one day out of nowhere, a dark thought came to me. It wasn't loud. It wasn't quiet either. The best way I could describe it is it was sharp. My brain told me, like I was hearing it from a person. All I heard was, why didn't you just drown? The way that I can't express enough how it felt like a person was standing in front of me telling me that, even though I was alone and nobody was around me, nobody spoke that to me. It felt like somebody spoke that to me. Why didn't you just drown? It made me freeze. I had always had inner thoughts in my brain and worries that I faced before that didn't come from a voice that I could have heard, not myself. But this time, having such a dark, untrue thought, that was my first time experiencing that. I knew that voice wasn't from God. I knew that kind of peace that God brings and this wasn't it. This was not that peace that God gives us. But the thought still hit me hard. For a moment, it felt real. A little too real than I'd like to admit. I started wondering how I could come that close to death and still miss it. Asking myself, why was I still here? What's the point? Now, that night after I was given that thought and started to really wonder and really think on that thought, I felt a sadness heavier than I felt before. And it wasn't just being tired. It wasn't just pain. It was that deep, lonely ache that makes you feel like you don't belong anywhere. Like you've become invisible, even to yourself. I remember, again, sitting in silence for a long time before I finally decided to take a bath. Like always, because those showers did not last long, and I was so eager to start my baths back up to where I was like, I'm just gonna go ahead and take a bath, fill up the water, not that much, knowing that I was gonna fill the water up to as much as it can go. So I filled up the bath, and only this time I knew what I was planning. So as I ran the water, I sat there and I watched it fill up, rising inch by inch, and it didn't look scary, and I didn't look away. I thought about everything that had led me here, the pain, the confusion, the exhaustion, the way no one really saw how bad it got inside my head. I thought about how peaceful it might be just to stop fighting. Before I carry on in my story, I'd like to stress again that this is not for little ears. This is something that the Lord has laid on my heart for me to share the good, the bad, the hard to hear times, and I think it's important in my life, and this was important in my story, and I'm still trying to see God through on his plan, and so I'm gonna follow through and share all that the Lord has been with me through. But let me carry on with that story. Like I said, I got in and I made a choice. I leaned back and I slipped into the water fully. My body was completely under the water. I had remembered the sound disappearing and the quiet pressure around me that the water was pushing on my body. The strange calm that came with it for a few seconds, it felt like relief. And the scary part is I didn't fight it. And even more scarier, I didn't want to. But then my body fought me. I came up gasping and coughing, choking on the water that I had taken in on purpose. I felt the burn in my lungs, the same type of burn that you would feel as a child jumping into the swimming pool and getting water stuck up your nose. Except I did this on purpose. I felt the sting in my eyes, and I remember thinking, I didn't even do that right. Still, I told myself, maybe I didn't need to. Maybe I'd just fall asleep and never wake up. Y'all, I heard of dry drowning, and in that twisted and broken moment, I thought that could be how it ended for me. Quietly and painlessly. So I went to bed that night, half hoping that I wouldn't open my eyes in the morning. So I went to sleep and I woke up in the morning. And when I did, something inside me shifted. I could feel that I had been spared, not because I was strong, not because I'd fight back, but because something didn't let me go. The Holy Spirit made it clear to me that night, it wasn't my time. God wasn't done with me yet. Looking back, I see that moment differently now. I see it as the night God showed me that even in my darkest thoughts, He was still there. When no one understood me, that even when I was trying to run from my life, He was already there, waiting to bring me back. It was so close. I was so close to losing everything, and yet somehow He kept my heart beating. That night did not fix everything. It didn't suddenly make life easy, but it became a turning point for me, a quiet beginning of believing that maybe there was still hope. So, like I said, when I woke up that next morning, I felt everything was still, very still, and the quiet kind of silentness that felt heavy in the air, where even breathing was louder than the sound around me, or louder than it is normally. I wish that I could tell you I learned that lesson and I heard those words from God right away, but I didn't. That was me looking back, seeing my story, seeing what happened, feeling what happened, and also learning from what happened. No, when I woke up, for a few seconds, I just laid there and I tried to figure out if it was real, if I had really done what I did the night before, or if that was just some twisted dream. But then in my chest, I started to feel it ache from the water I had swallowed. And I knew that it was real, and I really tried to end it. I didn't know why I was still alive. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with the fact that I was still here. It didn't make sense. Part of me almost wished, this is kind of hard to say, part of me almost wished that I wouldn't have woken up. But also the other part of me, the quieter and the deeper part, knew that maybe somehow there had been a reason that I did. I didn't understand. I didn't understand why I could feel both of these ways, so different, so drastic, at the same time. I didn't feel some grand calling or hear God's voice booming from the heavens saying, "This is why you're still here." I mean, it's funny to think of that, but it kind of just felt empty, like confused and almost disappointed that I was alive, but too scared to admit it. When I was lying there in bed, I remember staring at the ceiling, thinking, why me? Why am I still here? Why could possibly be so important that God didn't let me go? There were no answers, just silence. And that silence was loud. And that silence echoed in my head all day, wrapping itself around every thought that I tried to have. It followed me like a shadow in the sunlight. When I brushed my teeth, when I ate breakfast, when I took my medication, when I went through my day pretending like nothing ever happened. No one knew how close I had come to dying. I hadn't told a single person what I had done or even what I'd been thinking about. So, on the outside, it looked like the same person I'd always been. Maybe a little bit quieter, but still functioning. On the inside, though, I was barely holding it together. I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty for what I had done, for even thinking about it, and for almost throwing away the life that God gave me. It was so weird how I felt so different than how my head knowledge was. And what I mean by that is my head knowledge was saying, God has you. God's holding you. God will never leave you. He's with you. He will never, whatever. You know what I'm saying? Do you know what I'm saying? But how my heart felt was the complete opposite. I felt so lonely, so emotional, so all of these things. And it honestly overtook my head knowledge. It definitely felt like my emotions and my heart and my hurt, it definitely covered up all of my head knowledge. And so the guilt covered me, and I felt absolutely ashamed. Like, if anyone found out, that they'd look at me differently. Like, they'd see me weak and broken and selfish. And that was the last thing that I wanted. So I kept my mouth shut, zipped it, locked it, and put it in my pocket. I wasn't even going to give myself time to feel ashamed. The guilt, the fear, the confusion, it was all too much. So I pushed it back, way down, and tucked that night into my furthest thought, all the way back to the corner of my mind, and I built a wall around it. I told myself it did not matter and that it was over. That was, how it is, and that it would have been better if I never had talked about it. So I got up and I got dressed, I brushed my hair, put on a smile, and went with my day. I laughed when people made jokes, and I said I was tired when I got quiet, because that was easier than saying that I almost ended my life last night. I played along like I was okay, because it was easier to act fine than to explain what I didn't even understand myself. I told myself that just keep moving was the way to go. That was my way of surviving. If I could just keep moving forward, maybe I wouldn't have to look back. Maybe I could pretend it never happened. Maybe if I could just stay busy, that all the thoughts wouldn't come back. But deep down, they lingered. My memory of that night sat in the back of my mind, hidden under layers and layers of pretending, and yet it was still there. And sometimes it would just sneak up on me out of nowhere when the room would get quiet or when I was alone. It'd creep up on me when my body felt weak again. I'd think about how close I'd come, and every time it scared me a little bit more. I didn't understand why I was still here, but I started to realize that being alive meant something, even if I didn't know it yet. I didn't see it as mercy at the time, but now I do. I see how the Holy Spirit must have been protecting me, even when I wasn't asking it to, even when I wasn't asking to be protected. God didn't let me die that night. And though I didn't know why, I had to believe that there was still a purpose somewhere in all of it. So I kept waking up. I kept breathing. I kept moving forward, even if I didn't know where I was going. And maybe I was just choosing to stay. That's it for this episode. I understand that that was not something very fun to hear or very appealing to hit play and listen to. Honestly, that was really hard to film and really hard to talk about, knowing that somebody's going to listen to that. Now, I wish I can say that that was the only time that I had experienced stuff to this certain extent, but in the next episode, I will talk about how that wasn't the only time and how I wish that I would get to say that that was the only time. But again, if you're struggling with these thoughts, similar to how I did and sometimes still do, reach out for help. It's not the way that the Lord intended us to feel. It's our bad thoughts. It comes straight from the world, and the bad of the world comes straight from Satan, and we are his creation and we're never alone. That is the story that I didn't understand in my heart as I was experiencing such darkness. I'm going to go ahead and spoil the story, but I did eventually reach out for help, and it was hard, but it was so worth it. So in the next few episodes, I know definitely the next one, but possibly a few more after that, I'm going to go ahead and continue to talk about more of this dark emotional journey that I was in that ended up consuming my whole life, or at least it felt like it was consuming my whole life bit by bit. But I wanted to make sure that I was clear, and this has been my life, and I have done bad choices, and I have walked away from the Lord a few times, and I haven't listened to the Lord a few times, and that this is not the way you should think of yourself, but that I did, and I learned a lesson from it. So I just wanted to leave with the reminder that if you're struggling with the same things in your own way, you're not alone. You're not alone feeling that way, and you're not alone. The Lord has never left you. But you are so deeply loved, and if you are feeling that way, don't hesitate to reach out. No matter what your thoughts are telling you, you are the Lord's creation, and you are his child. And even though it might not feel fair or true, the Lord has a plan. He has his promises, and he will not empty-handedly give you something just for the fun of it. Anyways, with that being said, and I wanted to thank y'all so much for all of the sweet encouragement that I have received. It has made my heart so full. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye!